What's up, everybody, and welcome to Intentional with Miles Hunter. We're having intentional conversations. My name's Justin Price. I'm here with the one and only Miles Hunter.
What's up, everybody? Man, it's so great to be with you, Justin. Thanks for being the host here. We look forward to having a good time in our conversation today.
Hey, boys, we're going to have a good time, but we're going to be intentional for sure.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I've learned about you, it is that you have a strategic mind. The conversations are going to be about how do we not necessarily try to blow everything up for the sake of blowing up, but how can we look at things that are maybe controversial, maybe super important, conversations like discipleship, conversations like diversity, and what even reaching out, what does evangelism look like? Yeah. And we're going to base this kind of around what God's doing in the Treasure Coast community. We're here at Treasure Coast Community Church, TC3 as we call it.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to have some conversations, maybe get a little uncomfortable. Yeah. But the goal here is that we're going to walk away with some steps we can take to be more intentional with our lives. Because if there's anything that we all can agree on, it is that nobody wants to waste a minute. Nobody wants their life to end at any point thinking, man, I wasted it. Yeah. And if we can be just a little bit more intentional from these conversations with the life that God's called us to, and a life that we know He has in store for us, we'll all be better for it. So thank you for joining me today and for doing this, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in and being a part of this. I look forward to being able to walk with our church alongside of this journey. And ultimately, we're going to grow together. We're going to become better followers of Jesus together. And as a result, we're going to see the Treasure Coast transformed. And so I'm very excited about this conversation.
I love it. To kick this off here, I think it'd be great to give a quick overview. What, when someone says the word discipleship, it's kind of a churchy word. We don't have a ton of discipling happening outside of the church. Yeah. What, for somebody who's just trying to get context for this conversation, what are you thinking when you're talking about discipleship? What boundaries do you put on that?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand as you put let's say as you put a framework around the word discipleship where you're trying to explain it to somebody that's coming from outside of the church, I think the most important place to start is you're being discipled some way, somehow. Disciple is a follower. It's an apprentice. And some way, somehow you are being taught by somebody or something how to be from the moment that you were born. You're following somebody. Somebody is being a leader or a mentor to you, whether it was your dad or your mom. Somebody was instrumental in your world, and that person may have not have ever cared for you. It could be social media that could be your, you could be an apprentice of social media for all that matters. And so when I think about discipleship, for the follower of Jesus, a follower of Jesus is a follower of Jesus, and so that is what being a disciple is. It is not necessarily a verb. I wouldn't say the text of Scripture uses it as a verb. It is a noun. It is what you do, or who you are, not what you do. And so I think people use it in the wrong kind of fashion often, and so to think that you aren't when you come into this place with fresh eyes or as a new person, that's not true. You're a disciple of something or somebody. And so the same goes for followers of Jesus. Unfortunately, I would dare to say that, people that have connected to the life-changing power of Jesus Christ, not all of them are disciples of Jesus. Something different is doing the discipling. Jocko is doing the discipling, for a lot of guys right now. Podcast hosts, Joe Rogan, is who most followers, quote unquote, of Jesus are apprentices of right now. And so the question is what does it look like to genuinely, actually follow Jesus?
So you're the pastor at TC3 here in Treasure Coast. You guys have a huge vision for this community, for the Treasure Coast community. Yeah. As a church, there's a huge vision. You've been around as a church for a long time. You've been on staff at the church to really know the DNA, and have recently taken over as a senior pastor.
Yeah.
And as you think about, why you're here, and like why this church in this community, are you here? There's a reason that you've accepted that calling. There's a reason that you're here, and I'm just trying to unpack, what is in store for the church or for the community that is around this church, in terms of discipleship.
Yeah.
And how does that impact them?
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I think about like this community, mainly affluent here, right in Stewart, Treasure Coast varies in diversity from an socioeconomic status, things of that sort. But when I think about like our church, the phrase that comes to mind is like the Home Depot phrase, like doers get more done, like they will serve the Lord. And when it comes to being a disciple of Jesus, an apprentice of Jesus, I would say let's put it on a scale. So on one side of the scale is doers get more done. On the other side of the scale, it's be still and know that I am God. And I would say like our church, our community even, would weigh heavily on the doers get more done side. And as we're here for this season at this time, what is really on our heart and on my heart is like that we would pull a little closer to being still, and learning, man, how do we begin to follow Jesus? What are the practices and rhythms that we need to begin to develop as a people of God to look more like Jesus? There's all kinds of stuff happening in our community, good, bad, and different, growth, healthy economics, all those types of things, that we can step into and that we can serve and that we can do outreach in. But I really think that like we could continue down the path that we're going, which isn't a bad path at all, and continue to do and do and do. But I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice. I think we would be doing our community a disservice. I think they would see our works, and that would be a great thing. But on the other side of the works, it's like, hey, we have something that's different. And you want the something that's different to be a lifestyle that is different, to be hey, I've been with the Lord. And as I sit with the Lord, even though my situation may not change, my peace changes, my perspective changes. I'm more loving, I'm more gracious. And to be honest, like, I think what happens like when you begin to truly disciple people is that you may be doing less on a grand scale. Our events may be less. We may be serving a little less in our community. But I think like when you begin to truly follow Jesus, you're asking people in your neighborhood to come sit at your table. And so like on a massive scale event, it may seem like we as a church are doing less, but on a micro scale, which turns into a macro, like more neighbors are in their home. They're winning more people to Jesus, and as a result, the church is growing. The impact of the church is greater because you are making the people that have connected to Jesus true, genuine disciples of Jesus, and then they start looking like Jesus on their own, and they're not just signing up for an event that you're doing. And so I think in the in the immediate, it may be a wrestling match. I think in the long term, I think it would be greater impact.
Let's unpack it. I think this is a pretty complex. You said a lot of things. If I was a Christian listening to this for the first time, obviously we've gotten the chance to talk a lot, and I know kind of where you're coming from. If I'm just hearing this for the first time and I'm like, my pastor is saying, I don't think we should be doing as much.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what? Yeah. He wants to scale it. What about it might be something that I've had a really big impact on.
That.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And you're potentially saying I feel conviction about maybe all the things we're doing. And I think
Yeah.
we need to be spending more time with the Lord. And if we spend more time with the Lord, we might look a little different. People who spend more time with him might look different. And it's interesting because I do think in an affluent community, you get a lot of like people who are come to a level of affluence because of what they can do.
Right. Yeah.
And it's hard to say like, why is that a bad thing
Right.
in my faith?
Yeah.
It's funny to think like you got to say no to the thing that has rewarded you from the world
Right.
to sit and be still.
Yeah.
And that is a discipline,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
That it's really that there's actually some disciplines that we don't get rewarded for.
Right.
And it's maybe much easier for us to grasp the mentality of like, oh, well, you know, we could actually do a discipline that we are comfortable with. We've led a business, or
Right.
we've been a really high-performing employee, or we're a stay-at-home mom that crushes it. You know, we're
Right.
at every club, we're doing everything. We're raising successful kids is a ton of work.
Yeah.
And so if I'm translating that to being a Christian
Yeah.
or being a disciple, it should look like that too.
Yeah.
And so
It's like success is the same way.
Right.
If I'm going to be successful, I got to keep doing.
So it's quite countercultural, I think,
Yeah.
and maybe like not intuitive,
Right.
For the culture at this church,
Yeah.
to maybe grasp it. So I thought maybe it would be really helpful to say, what do people look like? So maybe just break that down. Like, what do people look like who are spending a lot of time with Jesus? What does a disciple really look like?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great like text you can pull from, and we can, cut and stop and
break it down. Yeah.
and bring some text in too. But yeah, hit me with that.
Yeah.
I think like if you could like give me some fundamental
Yeah.
points that I could grab onto as a viewer.
Yeah. I think what does a disciple look like? Simply like if you go through the fruit of the Spirit, right? And so it's like it's putting those on display: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Like it is putting those on display more and more and more, right? And so it's not just it's not just, hey, I'm doing more. It's because I've spent more time with Jesus, because I've begun to develop the rhythm of silence and solitude, because I have begun to develop, loving my neighbor, because I've developed the rhythm of fasting. Those types of things begin to put on display that fruit. And so like for me, it's always, hey, when somebody connects to the life-changing power of Jesus Christ and they step into the ordinance or the waters of baptism, and now they're like, okay, like I know what I believe. I've been baptized into this family. What's my next step? Well, your next step is to begin to look more like Jesus. And to be honest, why it is so countercultural is because it is. It is countercultural to tell people that have won the game of life, and that's not everybody in our church, and that's I'm throwing a large blanket here, because this isn't everybody, but I would say like it's a large amount of our culture, of our church culture, to be doers.
We could go like macro on the U.S. scale and say most of the people we follow.
Right.
So if we've been discipled by most of the people we've been discipled by,
Yeah.
do not lead with the fruit of the Spirit.
Right.
They're leading with financial success.
Yeah.
They're leading with power.
Yeah.
They have decision-making power. They have influence over large audiences.
Right. Yeah. Or their physical health,
yeah.
all of those types of
Their
things.
athleticism.
Yeah.
Any of those things.
Yeah. And so like that's the model for us. Well, our model is Jesus. And so the question then becomes is, all right, well, what does it look like to look more like him? Well, you follow him in the same manner in which you follow any other influencer that you're following, you follow him all the more. It is seeking his kingdom first, and it is seeking to look more like him. And so, and I think what's interesting is I think the results are better. So like when you decide to truly follow Jesus, to be an apprentice of Jesus, to live life as he did, to pause as he did, to maybe not be doing as much, what you're really saying is, God, you're not saying I don't want the same amount of quote unquote success. right? You're not saying I don't want to be financially well off. You're not saying I don't want to be physically fit. You're not saying that I don't want to be as good as a mom or dad or businessman. What you're saying is I'm choosing to follow you, and I trust that if I do that, the gap that stands in between what I see as this fleeting success, I trust and believe that you'll make up. And so, like, what it honestly does is it puts you in a place where it's like, there's a quote that I have on my desk. It says, more can be accomplished by prayer than by time.
Being a disciple, it's so hard for us to think that, like, man, following Jesus means taking time to pursue him, and that pursuing him, it looks very unproductive.
Yeah.
You know, I was actually thinking about this analogy. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but the analogy of, like, if you were to, like, make an investment, you know, the amount that you put into the investment is super relevant to what you can get back out of it. And that's like really clear to us. And we talk about, like, oh, you got to read, you got to listen to God. You got to read the word. Like, if you want to know God, you want to hear it. How do I know his voice? Well, you got to read his word.
Read his word.
Right.
Yeah.
So we say that all the time, and we say that around at church a lot, but I think understanding that a super simple business like principle of when we say no to doing the things that we think are the good that we should be getting done, it is actually us putting into the ultimate investment of saying we're going to put that time instead of into the doing, into knowing God, into listening to God, into praying, into seeking him. Yeah. Not just chasing. Right. Not just chasing the thing that feels like him, but it's like being fully confident in him is first saying, like, I'm going to 100% seek you. Yeah. And, you know, I think being a disciple starts at a surrender of ourselves. Right. But it's like a daily thing.
Yeah, 100%. Right. It's a momentary thing. And so, like, being a disciple, and it's a choice. Like I always say, like, discipline starts with a decision, and then that decision or discipline leads to a dependency. Like, you have to do it. You need it. It's like, man, I started working out because I made a decision to wake up at 5 and start working out. So I made that decision. I developed that discipline, and now when I don't work out, my body aches. Like, I need it now. You know, when I start spending time or make a decision to spend time in God's word first thing in the morning, and I decide to do that, I develop that discipline. And on days that I don't do it, I'm not the same person. I'm not as loving. I'm not as caring. I'm not as gentle with my wife. Like, I made that decision. I developed that discipline, and that discipline became dependent. I became dependent on it. And so, like, a disciple it's much of the same. A disciple is a decision that you make to follow Jesus. And it's like, when I'm not following Jesus, I am not the same person. If I'm following something else, I'm different. If I'm following somebody else, I'm different. And that is 100% true. Like, and so the question is like, who are you an apprentice of today? You know, it's for me, it's all right, I'm an apprentice of Jesus in the morning. And then I get, you know, I spend time with Jesus, and then I come to the office and I get hit with 1,000 different things. And by lunchtime, if I'm in my car headed to lunch or headed home, and I'm not listening to the Bible, or if I'm not praying, or if I'm not listening to worship music, if I decide to throw on a podcast instead, whoever's on that podcast is going to disciple me. And then when I get back to the office, it's like, all right, am I an apprentice of Jesus right now? Or am I an apprentice of whoever it is that I was listening to on my way back to the office? And so do I need to go, like, in my office and actually, like, close the door and pray again and be like, Lord, like, I got a lot going on this afternoon. There was a lot that hit me this morning, and I need to be an apprentice of you in the moments and hours to come. And so I think, yeah, you're right. It's a moment by moment decision, and it's different for everybody because you know your capacity. You know how often you need to reconnect. I think there's a reason that Jesus is like, hey, like, pray without ceasing, pray all day, be in constant communication with me, follow me constantly. Because I think, like, we as humans, like, we need it. There's this video of this sheep, you know, like, getting pulled out of this hole. It's, you know, its herder or shepherd is pulling it out of this hole, pulls it out. and then sheep takes 2 gallops and jumps right back into the hole, and the shepherd's like, for real, bro? Like, I gotta pull you back out. And I think like we're the same way in our relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
Like constantly we have to engage with the shepherd. Constantly, like we have to hold on to the hand of the shepherd, because if not, something else in our world is chomping at the bit to lead us. Social media is chomping at the bit to lead us. I could be great all day long, and I can get home at the end of the day and be scrolling on Instagram and find all kinds of mess and chaos that wants to lead me. And that can lead me, you know, as I'm stepping into the house with my wife and with my kids, and all of a sudden I'm not an apprentice of Jesus anymore for the moment.
I love it. Let's recap.
Yeah.
Let's recap for a second. So being a disciple is choosing to follow or be apprenticed by.
Yeah.
So if we're going to be a disciple of Jesus at TC3, what you're saying is, man, the vision that we've got for the church is that we are going to seek to be discipled as much as we possibly can by Jesus, by God's word, and that there is an incredible outcome to being discipled by him. But it only comes with time with him. So if we're not listening, if we're not spending time talking to him, listening, reading, in prayer, if we're not being still or stopping from the doing, that is even good stuff, not even just stopping the bad stuff. A lot of us probably just need to also
stop from the bad stuff.
Some of the bad stuff.
Some of the bad stuff probably needs to stop. Let's be honest.
But if we want to look more like Christ, the only real solution here is to choose to seek him. And we don't have to have it all figured out.
Right.
We don't have to know how to be Jesus.
No.
We don't have to, you know, we'd say like oftentimes like discipleship is like being the hands and feet of Jesus. Like, how are you going to be the hands and feet of Jesus
if you don't spend time with him?
So your doing might be looking a little bit like not quite Jesus, like that weird clone version of Jesus, until we spend enough time with him to start correcting those things to be closer to him. And to have more of that fruit of the Spirit. And so being still, I think that's a super tough thing for us to grasp. And I mentioned the idea of like investing your time into getting to know him has the greatest return. If we were to think of like our minutes like dollars, it would be like, man, we spend all day trying to earn a living. And we spend all night trying to raise our families. We do all of that and we're like, we got 3 minutes left for God. And so if we're not willing to make some sacrificial investments, we will not get big returns. We will not look like Jesus. We will not have the attributes of Jesus that we want. We will miss out on the blessings. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is like, man, if you don't first be still and say no to things that are good and bad to pursue him first, then we will be going off in the wrong directions.
I'm saying that, but really, you know, it's not just that, like, if you don't seek Jesus first, you're going to choose the wrong things. It's, if you don't put Jesus first and seek his kingdom first, you might be choosing good things over a God thing. And so, like, I think, like, most people are looking for the God thing without following his son. And that would be, the irony would be so great. The irony would be astronomical of like, hey, I'm looking for the God thing. I'm looking for God to impact my family. I'm looking for a God-like business deal. I'm looking for a God-like influence. And yet I'm going to search for that in 1,000 other things besides the Son of the living God. And I think like the enemy wants us there. I think the enemy has gotten a lot of us there, to the point where it's like, man, like I want blessing, right? This word blessing has been thrown around by everybody nowadays, like bless, you know? And I'm like, hashtag bless, right? And it's like, well, daggone, like this isn't working for you. Like you want to be blessed, but like there is only one that truly blesses. And so like when I think about that, like blessed, happy, like genuinely true, like happiness that comes from the Lord, like, you go through the Beatitudes, blessed are they, blessed are they that are persecuted, but the world's not looking for blessing and persecution.
Yeah.
And so like when you're a follower of Jesus, culturally, things become flipped upside down and on their head. And so like, what I'm saying is like, man, we can start looking for the God things through his son. And if we begin to follow Jesus, we will have, like I will give you the desires of your heart, but like first you got to like seek me, like put me first, And so like, that's our mission as a body and as a church. And even as we're talking about vision, there's 1,000 opportunities for us. There's 1,000 things that we can be doing in the next year, 5 years, 10 years. There's 1,000 opportunities that are on the horizon, and yet they're all good. They're all really good. I'm not looking for the good. I'm looking for the God thing. And so I'm just trying to follow Jesus. And as I'm following Jesus, the mission is that our church would develop this rhythm and practices that they too would follow Jesus so that we as a family can begin to see the God thing.
You know what's really cool about what you're talking about is we don't always know what we should not be doing.
Right.
Especially when our world is inundated. We're not spending that much time with God.
Yeah.
It's like, I know maybe like I got things in my life that I should probably let go of.
Yeah. I don't know which one it is.
I don't know what it is, but when you chase after him, when you make that sacrifice of time,
yeah,
it is so clear.
So clear.
He's not confusing. Like
No.
That's one thing I would say in my entire life of knowing God, the time that I've known him, I don't think I've ever said like, man, it's just unclear to me. Like
right.
what I need to let go of here.
Yeah. And I think you're right. When you're following Jesus, it's not only that it's clear, because I don't know if this was just me or if this was like the people of God. Like, I think it was just me. Let's just say, let's just say it was me. Like, I found myself praying for clarity a lot. And I was like, I don't need clarity. It's clear.
Still.
Yeah. Well, no, not even that. It's like, it's clear. I just need to trust.
Oh.
And I think that's the difference, right? The people of God, like if you're actually following Jesus, if you're an apprentice of Jesus, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be clear. I just need to trust and do what it is that I know I'm supposed to do. Like we had recently, we had a student in here that, knew that he should be breaking up with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he's following Jesus. So he knew clearly what he was supposed to be doing. And he was in here talking to everybody and their mother. He was seeking affirmation, but he already knew what God was calling him to do because he's following his son. And yet he didn't need clarity. He just needed to do what God had already called him to do and to trust God with the rest of the process.
Well, it's way easier for us to say like, that must not be the thing.
That can't be it.
Yeah, like
that can't be it. That's too hard.
I see that thing, but that would be really painful. So, we will quickly try to make an excuse of like, I need more clarity.
Right.
I need her to break up with me before this goes. And sometimes, so many times in my life, I feel like I've had to get to that point where I just prayed, God, can you just shut that door?
Yeah. No, 100%.
I'm not strong enough.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough.
No.
To shut that door.
Right.
That isn't what you want.
Yeah.
But I am smart enough to trust you.
Yeah.
And to be at peace with the fact that I know when your spirit is moving. I can feel and sense a peace that passes understanding when you shut those doors.
Yeah.
That it's okay.
Right.
And sometimes, that's just what it takes.
Right. Yeah.
Especially with the big stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
And sometimes like you get the freedom, you get the common grace to walk through the door. And it's like, all right, God, like I've been telling him lately, like, God, every door that's available to me, I'm going to walk through. If the fruit is low, I'm going to pick it. If you don't want me to walk through the door, close it. If you don't want me to pick it, you better put it up higher. Like, and that's
make me jump.
make me jump and jump pretty high. Like, and that's the thing is, for our church and our culture, like our staff here, most of us here are former student athletes. So we are doers as well. The being still and knowing that I am God is hard for me. I'm trying to put this practice into my world now as I wake up, and the first thing I do isn't work out. The first thing that I do right now is sit in my office, try to read a psalm, and look at Jesus and let him look at me. And as I'm sitting there with my journal and with my Bible, the things that are running through my brain are what needs to get done. And I'm frustrated. I haven't had a morning yet where I don't leave that space mad and frustrated because I'm having such a hard time mentally just locking in on Jesus. Like it is so difficult for me. And I think it'll be difficult for you. Like, that's why it's a practice, right? That's why it's a rhythm that has to get developed. It's not something that's already developed for us as followers of Jesus. But as I think about that, I think to myself, like, man, God can get us to that place. I totally lost my train of thought and where I was going. But like, at the end of the day, like, God wants us to get to a place where he's like, hey, like, that time is no longer grueling for you and you adore it, and you want nothing more than just to be in that space with me instead of it just being a fight the whole time.
So for somebody who's not doing this, they're like, man, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to be a disciple. I'm going to try to give up. What's a good place to start? Talk me through that.
I would start with I would say your bookend routines, right? So the morning and the evening, like what you do in the morning, first thing you wake up, grab your cup of coffee. So if you need to wake up 30 to 45 minutes earlier, then you already wake up. Get your butt up. If you need to wake up before the kids, get your butt up before the kids. Grab your coffee and sit in a space where it can just be you and the text and God. And take a psalm. Like, if you need to start in Psalm 1, it's a great place to start. And just pray that psalm back to God. And let him be your focus. Like, look at Jesus and let him begin to look at you. And use his word to do it. So, like, I know it sounds weird, right? And you may only get 5 minutes in, maybe 10 minutes in, and your mind may be scattered, and you may be going through 1,000 things. But what I've been doing as my mind begins to go to the things about work and my family and all the details of life is as everything comes up, I write it down and I begin to pray about it. Because I believe that God has placed it on my heart with purpose and with a reason. And even though I may not be able to focus on him, I can give it back to him. And so that would be my greatest encouragement. If you're looking for a place to start with God, his word, and praying his word back to him, and then book in your day with the same rhythm and practice, like in your day in that way. So before you go to bed, like, find a room. I would encourage you not to do it in your bedroom. So if you have a back porch or if you have somewhere outside, like we live in Florida, the outside is nice in the morning and in the evenings. If you enjoy lizards and stuff like that, I don't. I have an office in my house, that I do it, or a quiet space that you can find. And I would book in your days like that. So that would be my encouragement of how to start.
I'm super distracted by thinking about you not being able to do it outside.
Bro, I can't. Like, only in the winter, or if I'm like up in the mountain somewhere. But God in his, humor moved my wife and I to Florida, and I don't like any amphibians. So lizards, frogs, like none of that stuff.
Yeah. Snakes are cool with?
No, snakes. No, none of that. None of that stuff. I can't do it. So I can't be outside. And I would love to be. That's the thing, is like, I would really like to be, because I like outside. I love it, but I can't do it here first thing in the morning. Not while it's dark and I can't see nothing. That's not going to happen.
You just hearing it?
Yeah.
Like, oh, man.
My backyard sounds like a rainforest. Like, it's terrifying. You hear all these... Like, I can't, bro. I cannot do it. It's terrifying.
All right, so my takeaway is look for a space that you cannot be distracted.
Yeah.
If you're terrified, that's the wrong
place. That's the wrong space, yeah.
Okay. I got it. That's a good tip. And then 5 minutes, 10 minutes is
start with 5-10 minutes. Don't beat yourself up, because if you're like me and your brain is running, if you're a doer, if you're a high capacity leader, if you like accomplishing tasks and checking off boxes, like it's
Yeah.
a hard thing to be a pastor and be a box checker. One, because people are never done. Like I'm never going to be done. And so like, I enjoy when I get to check some boxes off, but this isn't one that you're going to check. This isn't a box check. This isn't my morning rhythm's finished. My evening rhythm's finished. Like, no, your growth and your apprenticeship to Jesus is never going to be done on this side of eternity. And so, yeah, start with 5 to 10 minutes and don't beat yourself up when you can't just focus on Jesus. Like those things that come in your mind, give them back to Jesus. Pray about them.
This is life-changing. So if you can prioritize like being still, and if you can spend this time, you will, like this is a promise, you will look more like Jesus.
Right.
You will receive the fruit of the Spirit by taking this time.
Yeah. 100%.
Little by little.
Yeah.
And you're also saying most likely it will suck.
At the beginning.
At the beginning especially. Just like anybody who's ever not worked out for a while.
Yeah.
And then gone choking up.
It's okay.
This is a
It's
really
right.
personal
It's real
analogy.
personal for you.
Has gone and then worked out with a trainer
Yeah.
who works you out kind of like you never took a break.
Right.
And then you're walking around 3 days later like this.
Yeah,
You
with alligator
can't-
arms. Yeah.
Because you can't move your bicep anymore because you thought you could curl as much. It didn't happen to me, but like I know people.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that have experienced that. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's every single time I stop exercising. The pain is so bad.
Yeah.
But then after you get into the routine of doing it, the rewards are so good that it's painful when you don't do it.
Right.
And so I think to recap, like the idea here of becoming a disciple is something that as a church at TC3, we are going to lean into.
Yeah.
That you feel convicted that there's more time with God needed than there is just doing things.
Right.
But I think the big picture is if as a church we were to lean way more in, if we were to spend more time not doing things, that the outcome as a church that looked more like Jesus
We'll be doing more.
will end up doing more.
Yeah.
And it may not be under the church's programmatic flag.
Banner, right. Yeah.
So it may not be 10 times the mission trips. It
Right.
may not be 10 times the programs. It might not mean 5,000 church services.
Right.
But it would mean maybe that there's more people loving people who are far from God in their community.
Right.
It might mean more people having dinner with their neighbors.
Yeah.
And taking the time to reach out.
Yeah.
And because what happens in those quiet moments with God where we are still is he starts to put on our hearts the things that are like him.
Yeah. The things that burden his heart. Yeah.
And the more time we give to him, the harder it is to ignore those things.
Right.
So it will happen.
Yeah.
You will, whether you like your neighbor or not, if that is the thing God's burdening on your heart and you do put the time in, you eventually will find yourself loving that person that you don't like very much. And you will find yourself wanting to cook for them, wanting to reach out to them, not because they think it would look good to Pastor Miles if they showed up to church with their neighbor.
Right.
We're not talking about this like church marketing metrics stuff. We're talking about just being the church in our community.
Yeah. Right. 100%. You're talking about followers of Jesus looking like Jesus out there. And so it is, this follower of Jesus concept, this discipleship, I'm a disciple concept is I want to look more like Jesus. As I look more like Jesus, I'm going to start serving people like Jesus. I'm going to start having more people over. I'm going to start sharing the gospel like Jesus. It's going to be my primary thing. And as that begins to happen, you see the people of God doing what the church is already trying to get them to do in an event type of level, on an event scale. And it's like, we don't have to make events because our people are already doing this. And so I think that's the goal, right? Is not that it would lessen events for us, but ultimately that we're looking at our people and we're like, they're already doing that. And so this this thing, following Jesus, being a disciple is not more, it's not, hey, I need to know the Bible more. It's not, I need to know, Genesis through Revelation. It's not, I need to understand the inerrancy of the text of Scripture. Yes, those things are highly important. It's not, I need to be a better person. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm sorry, controversial. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you're not going to be a better person until you start following Jesus. And even then, you're going to have bad days. Even then, you're going to mess up. But when you begin to be a follower of Jesus, you learn to give yourself the grace for that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
This doesn't necessarily, like, there's no commitment here saying, like, you expect life to be easier for the church if they will do this. Like, it's not like if you spend 5 to 10 minutes praying and reading the Bible in the mornings that life will be easier.
No, I think it'll be harder.
Right.
Oh, 100%. Like, I'm going to be honest. Like, I think you begin to. I think the enemy loves when we're busy.
Yeah.
I do.
He's busy. He's not really like causing any.
Right. Yeah. Like, they're serving a lot, but them personally and their sanctification and their growth, like, they're not sharing the gospel with their coworkers. Let them be busy.
Right. They're gossiping. They're not sharing the gospel.
Let them be busy.
Yeah.
And this isn't like, I'm not saying that, like, hey, everybody's serving and nobody is, looking like Jesus. But what I am saying is, like, I do think the enemy enjoys when we are busy and yet we are unfruitful. And so I think us taking on the mantle of, I am an apprentice of Jesus, and he is my primary focus. He is. I think that this topic probably hits for 25 to 35-year-olds more than anybody, because we are the ones so inundated with information, with technology, with podcasts, with the next big kick. We're trying to figure out how to make it as leaders. We're trying to figure out how to make our family financially secure. And so we're seeking everything and anything.
Yeah.
Like, for all of us right now, like, it's just, I get it. It's a thing. It's, man, what's the political climate? How do I be involved in the political square? Who's the influencer that I need to follow that's going to tell me how I should think about what's happening politically in our world? Like, we are being discipled by anything and everything except Jesus. We just find the person that says they love Jesus to disciple us instead of Jesus himself. And so that, like, the enemy loves that. The enemy wants that more than anything. God forbid that we were to actually just follow Jesus. The enemy would be pissed. And he would start coming. He would start coming for our families. He would start coming for our people. And we would know, blessed are they that are persecuted. And so, like, I think we would begin to experience God moving in this place, but I think that we would begin to see suffering on another level as well. And the people of God would rally around that. And I think our church would be healthier as a result. I think the people of God would be healthier as a result. But I would be lying to say that, like, man, this would be easy. Nothing of great value and great worth ever is. And so, yeah, I think it's a significant thing to talk about.
That's great. Yeah. So your vision of TC3 is that we are a church of disciples of Jesus.
Yeah. My vision for TC3 is that we are people that connect people to Jesus and then teach them how to follow Jesus after that connection is made. Yeah. And teach is important because we're all students, right? And so it's like, well, how do I do this? Okay. What is the practice that I need to develop now? And so that's the thing, right? We start with be still and know. Like, start with being quiet, start with sitting with Jesus, and then you begin to develop practices after that. Generosity is a practice, and so you begin to look at those things and say, okay, like, how did the disciples follow Jesus? How did they follow their rabbi, their teacher? What are the things that he was trying to develop in them? What are the practices that they did after he was gone that they continued to do? And followers of Jesus throughout the centuries have continued to do that enabled them to look more like the Messiah. And that's our heart, is that we would one, as a team, as a staff, begin to develop those within ourselves and within our own life rhythms. And so this is coming for our team first before anybody else. But then that we would begin to help the church do the same thing.
Do you want to get into any of these aspects of, like, you know, how does this connect a little bit more to the church expectations and ideas?
I think, like, if there's an important thing that I would want the church to take away from this, and how this would, I guess, if I could say, like, man, church, who knows when you're going to hear this podcast and where we're going to be as a church once you finally hear it. But I think contextually, if I'm building a framework for this and I want you to prepare, I guess I would say prepare in this manner. Know that, like, as we have done, like, we call them right now life groups. Our life groups and the Bible study classes that we do on Thursday mornings, Sunday mornings, the bicycle groups that we have, the pickleball groups that we have, all of these things that we have are good things. I don't know how many of them are disciple-making things. And so what that means is, like, things like a rooted, I would say, is a disciple-making thing. It is teaching followers of Jesus how to develop practices and rhythms in their life to follow Jesus. And what we're currently looking for as a team is how to find a type of rooted that doesn't stop. And so, like, our emphasis going forward will be, hey, Bible study and classes won't be under the quote unquote life group banner. Our pickleball groups, this is a church, like, we are a church for the unchurched. Like, that is our mission and will stay our mission. Like, we have always said, like, we are a church for the disenfranchised. We are the church for the people that are disconnected from Jesus, that maybe have never stepped into a church. Like, Janae and I came to this place because we said, hey, we're in Virginia. We love our Bible teaching, Bible believing church, but we spent a year in 1 Peter. 1 Peter ain't that big of a book. And so, like, our heart was always like, God,
it's pretty small.
Yeah, it's a pretty small book. Our heart was always, God, take us to a place where we can invite our lost friends to. Take us to a place where we can invite our friends that had never stepped foot inside the four walls of a church, that they would love to come to, and that they would feel at home from the moment that they stepped through the doors. And so our heart was always, hey, take us to the unchurched so that we can connect the unchurched to Jesus. I don't want to churchify them. I want to connect them to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so when we came here, we stepped off, came into the house, and we watched people from recovery come off the buses in droves. We watched people, pull up on skateboards and put out cigarette butts as they walked into the church. And we sat beside a dude after one of the services when they were doing 4 services in the old building. And we were like, yo, why are you here? He was from recovery. And he said, when we have the option, we can either go to the beach on Sunday, and we choose to come here. And we had watched so many people from recovery come into this place, connect to Jesus, lift up their hands. And we were like, we're home. And I remember flying home back to Virginia that day after visiting this place, looking over the Atlantic and crying my eyes out, because I'm like, we're moving to Florida. That was 6 years ago, and we've been here since. And so our heart of this place being the church for the unchurched will never cease to exist. Our heart now is that as we connect people to Jesus, as we connect the unchurched to Jesus, that we teach them how to actually follow him. Because they've been following something for their entire life, and it hasn't worked out for them, and now they want to follow Jesus. And so once we connect them to him, we have to teach them how to follow him. Yeah. And it would be a disservice for us not to do that. And so I think, like, what we're ultimately trying to do is, like, hey, we have all of these things here. So let's go with, like, our special interests or our special activities groups, pickleball, bike riding, motorcycle riding, all those things, they don't go away. They don't cease to exist. They just get changed. Their directive gets changed. So instead of being a life group, like discipleship is not happening in that group. And so instead of being a life group, it's like, hey, this is how we attract people that are unchurched. So like they get here, they're not connected to Jesus, but they're in the doors. So let's tell them like, hey, you like pickleball? Like come play pickleball with us. That's their way of engaging with followers of Jesus. That's their way of engaging with people that already love the Lord and that are already in relationship with him. And then those people connect to Jesus through those special interest groups or through those special activities that we already have going on. And then we point them to, okay, you want to connect to the life-changing power of Jesus Christ. You're connected to Jesus. We get you baptized. We allow you through starting point to know what it is that we truly believe so that you can begin to understand this thing. And then we get you plugged into a discipleship process. Then we get you through a rooted, and then we get you into a men or women's ministry that you begin to actually get discipled. You actually begin to confess sin. You actually begin to practice the rhythms of being still and knowing. You actually begin to practice what generosity looks like. And so for us, it's not a taking anything away. It's more so a adding on and creating a clear funnel for what we're trying to do. And so the discipleship never ends, whether it's for the 12-year-old that comes to know Jesus or the 65-year-old that's been here for 20 years. It is hey, we can all get better at developing these rhythms. And so once a year, our goal is, hey, we're going to introduce a rhythm this year. We're going to introduce a practice this year. So from kids to adults, the practice is the same. Hey, this year, the practice is like, be still and know. Like, we just want you to learn and to develop this year how to be still. We'll have a men's ministry event in the fall and a women's ministry event in the spring, and the focus is the same for that event, but we're going to spend 8 weeks each in a course and a program, kind of like a rooted, where we're going to develop this practice. And so, and then, for the church as a whole, it's like, hey, this is the practice we're developing. So as one church, we're having one big conversation. As you're growing, mom and dad, your kids are growing with you in the same manner. And so, like, I think that's the picture of the church. I think that makes this church a little unique in that. I think it still allows people that are unchurched to step into this place and be like, it seems like everybody's having one conversation. The person behind me asked me, like, hey, how's your practice of being still and knowing going, as you're introducing yourselves during announcements. But the church is having one big conversation. And as somebody that's unchurched walks in, they're like, yo, this is a real family. Not that they're on the outside of, but that they want to be a part of.
Yeah, I like that. You said we're not necessarily trying to eliminate a bunch of things.
Yeah.
So your vision is not to come in and like clean everything out.
No.
As organizations, like we typically, churches like many other organizations are super good at starting things and adding things on without ever asking the question of like, should we
continue to do this?
Continue to do other things, or are there things that we should let go of? And I think it's like pretty human of us to do that because we have attachments to the things that we've started.
Yeah.
And, it's the same reason why people live in houses full of crap.
Yeah.
Because we're attached to that.
Right.
I don't want to get rid of that, or it seems wasteful, or one reason or another. Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good human reasons, but for a healthy organization, we do have to try to shed off things that don't necessarily fit the vision. And so I think a lot of times when there is a new leader, the hesitation, whether it's like from a staff or from a congregation or leaders or volunteers or whatever, is like, oh man, are they going to try to like change everything?
Yeah.
And so what I hear you saying is that you believe in a lot of the things that are in place here.
Yeah. The bones are good.
What you hope we can do is align them strategically so that we are getting the most efficiency and effectiveness for discipleship for those people who have said, hey, I'm raising my hand. I want to be a follower.
Yeah.
I want to follow Jesus. And so you're saying, I don't want to give those people who are calling themselves Christians or Christ followers, I don't want to give them so much more doing and distraction and not more time just following Jesus.
Yeah.
And so your hope is to, if there is any trimming that comes in it, it is trimming off unintentionality.
Right.
In hopes that we can do a better job of just growing deeper with our relationship.
Yeah. No, that's what you're saying is right. That we would begin to prune things. And so, yeah, you're right. We aren't trying to eliminate things. We are trying to hone in our focus. That's 100% correct. And so I wouldn't say that goes for every area of our ministry. It would be unwise for us to not look at everything and say, okay, like, are there sacred cows here? Are there golden calves here? Like that would be unwise. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to discipleship, when it comes from getting people to follow Jesus and look more like Jesus, I really do believe that the bones are good here. Mm. I wouldn't be here if that weren't the case.
Sure.
I wholeheartedly believe that the bones are really good. I also believe that we can be doing better. And so that to me is encouraging, and it gives us something to say, all right, like how can we help our congregation go deeper here? How can we get better here? What can we be doing different here? And yeah, it's just a focus. And right now, discipleship is my greatest focus because I believe wholeheartedly that everything will flow out of that. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I learned as a student guy coming in here, the blessing was that Gordon gave me autonomy. The youth ministry was mine. I had the keys to the car and I could do whatever I wanted. And they had some rhythms and practices and events and all of those things that they did, that they loved, that they enjoyed, that I didn't see as valuable or beneficial, and I cut them. And as a result, like, we eventually got to the place where I thought the Lord was leading us to be, and, gained the vision and the value that I thought the Lord had given me for the student ministry. But if I were to go back and do it, I would have built culture how I believe the Lord had called me to build culture without eliminating. And those things that like needed to be quote unquote eliminated or pruned, they would have fell off sooner or later. Mm. And so
you would have nurtured the fruit bearing limbs.
Right.
The other stuff would have
fallen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would have been clear.
Yeah. And so if it's not meant to stay or be, I believe wholeheartedly, like without me making things go up in flames or wrestling feathers, and I have no problem wrestling feathers. I just don't do it if I don't need to.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's a wise leadership decision. And so what I'm saying is what needs to fall off, if God would have it, it will, as we begin to develop the discipleship culture that I believe he wants. And so that'll happen organically, and I won't have to do anything. I believe God will do it.
I think it's really valuable that you're saying you're not scared of having those uncomfortable conversations. Yeah. You're saying that, well, at least what I think I hear you saying is that you actually believe that God and his disciples and Jesus's disciples would actually be able to identify those things, maybe even better than you.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. So if you're asking people, if you're saying, hey, I want to implement a process where we begin to develop practices that enable us to look more like Jesus, nobody's going to fight against that. Or the prayer is
that's a tough one to fight.
Yeah,
like, that pastor wants to follow Jesus.
This is tough, And so I don't think anybody's gonna fight that
until
if people buy into it, genuinely buy into it. Like the football cultural development now comes into play for me. If people buy into that and do it with all of their heart, and we are all following Jesus, well, the things that don't need to stay won't stay. And so like preferences for people, golden calves for people, things that people enjoy, but they don't need to be a part of the church. Like the prayer, I know this is a reach, and somebody's going to email in when they start listening to this podcast and be like, how many people bucked up once we get there? But like the prayer is that like if we're all genuinely bought into the process, when it's time to prune or something is about to fall off of the branch, we would let it fall off.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, this is the route that we're going. This is the culture that we've built. That's an old thing, and it needs to get pruned.
That's cool. I'm working my way up to some heavier hitting questions for you.
I don't know why I'm making my way downtown. Just came into my head, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I don't know why. Thank you, Terry Crews. Yeah, appreciate it. I don't know who sings the song. In my mind, Terry Crews sings it, so
it
doesn't really matter.
I don't think anyone sings it better than Terry Crews.
Thank you so much.
But I think it's Vanessa. I don't know her last name.
Something.
I mean, not that you were going to download it later.
I am. I'm going to find out now after this. I am going to download it.
Yeah. But talk me through some of the things that being a dad has taught you about discipleship.
Oh my gosh. I'd say, I don't know. Being a dad, there's a moment that happened while I was home. We just had a son. We just had a son, 3 weeks ago? He's 3 weeks old yesterday. And we have a daughter that's 17 months. And so after having Justice, we're playing man-to-man defense. Man-to-man defense is exhausting. It's tiresome. So for those of you that have 3, 4, 10 kids, like, God bless you. You're playing zone, which means you're probably losing a lot because there are a lot of gaps in your coverage. But man-to-man is exhausting. And there was a morning where, like, listen, we spank our kids. I don't know how that's going to go, but like this, we spank our kids. Yes,
Yeah.
She 1.5, but she knows. She's manipulative, all get out. Addie, don't touch that. She'll go to it and be like, no. Like she knows she's not supposed to touch it. And so there was one morning where she was being extremely ornery. And I had like the no stick in my hand, and I was like, don't touch that. It was probably the third time. And I give her so many times, and if she touched it, she was really going to hurt herself. And she just like kept inching towards it, and almost touched it, and then finally did. And I had the no stick, and I was like, and I saw her go like this, like scared out of fear, and I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't follow through. I was like, no, I can't. Like you're about to get hit, and I see you, and you see me, and I don't want that for you, and I don't like it. It broke me. It broke me as a dad. Maybe I'm soft. Like I don't know. Like maybe I am just soft.
You think you're hard.
Yeah. I'm totally soft. Like it broke me
until you see that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have 2 different responses to this. You shouldn't be spanking your kids. Your kids are scared of you. You know, DCF gonna be at the house tomorrow. My mom used to say, I wish you would call DCF. I beat you, and then I beat them when they got here. Terrified for them. Terrified for DCF.
That's a great clip.
That's a great clip. So scared for them, bro. They were going to get beaten. I say all that to say what being a dad has taught me about discipleship is that Jesus truly sees all of me. And he's not afraid. Like he's not afraid. He wants me. And even when I'm like sitting in that room, I'm being still and I can't focus on him. He still wants me to be right there. Like he sees every bit. And he knows. And he's like, I know all those things are flooding your brain, Miles. Like hand them back. Like give them back to me. Like I gave you them anyway. They're a blessing from me and they're stressing you out. So just like pray through them as they come up. Mm-hmm. And he sees me in those moments, and he wants me even in those moments, even when I'm messing up and not living how I'm supposed to. Like he sees me, and he's like, yeah, consequence is going to come, but maybe it's not, because like I know that you understand the brokenness of that moment, and that's enough. Maybe, I don't know, but like if there's anything that being a dad has taught me about the discipleship process, it's that God like sees me, just as I see my kids, and it's not deep. It's not, I'm going to go home and I'm going to be like, something's much better than that. But like right now in the moment, like that's it. It is it's a heartbreaking truth. Like, as I think about like my daughter in that moment, and I'm like, God sees me like that. He sees like in me, not, yeah.
not everybody that's listening to this is a parent, but we are all a child
Yeah.
to somebody.
Yeah.
And I think it's super easy for me to think about. I had a terrible relationship with my dad when I was younger, in the sense that he wasn't around, like didn't know him, and I had a lot of his attributes.
Yeah.
I had his DNA.
Yeah.
And there was things that I could connect to him that, or anybody who knew him could connect to me, right?
Yeah.
And then when I was like 13, I started to spend more time with him.
Yeah.
And probably from the ages of like 13 to 18, spent more time with my dad. And I noticed that I found a lot of confidence in knowing him.
Yeah.
With who I am inherently am.
Right.
And so his strengths and his weaknesses.
Yeah.
And coming into that self-awareness, I think as like a young adult now,
Yeah.
of knowing these things are things I need to watch out for, because I've seen these things in my dad. And then these things over here are things that are strengths of mine I can actually lean into.
Right.
Now, I don't think that there's a lot of weaknesses we have to watch out for from God.
Praise God.
But as we spend time in chasing after that influence of him, I think that we will find ourselves being able to identify inside of us and connect in the Holy Spirit the things that we can have confidence in.
Yeah.
And that if we're like new to this whole following Jesus thing, and we're not necessarily sure of ourselves, like those first steps, as we're trying to figure out, when am I going to get hit?
Yeah.
When is the no-no stick coming out? We'll sense it. Like we'll know, like,
Right.
because
Let me stop here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's some really cool things that we can understand from our relationship with our parents, that we can really connect with discipleship.
Yeah.
We could revisit that too if you have some more thoughts.
Yeah. That, like I said, I'm going to go home and step away and be like, man, I never thought about that. It's a good, and I'll have something better. Yeah. But right now, that's the thing that comes to my mind.
You're highly strategic.
Yeah.
You're an incredibly strategic guy. And very intentional. Yeah. And I think a lot of what you've talked about is your vision for this church is to look for little opportunities in which we can be more intentional. Yeah. Make those little shifts. Like, you're not here trying to like throw the playbook out. Right. You're going, can I move this guy over here or here? And I think we're going to get a better outcome. Yeah. So I think that if you could take another stab at being intentional with your time to follow Jesus, how that creates a better life and it does open up margin, because we are listening and looking, and we're also able to receive and see what God is doing better the more we know him. And I think even taking it back to your daughter, it's like, if you're not home spending time with her, then she doesn't know what she's not supposed to be doing. Right. So she's not looking for you when she's about to do that wrong thing. She's just like recklessly doing it, right? But you invest that time in with her, she's stuck with you. She's hearing your voice. And so now all of a sudden, when you're just like, when you put in that dad voice, she knows it. Right. And she knows that there's punishment coming from it, or she knows that there's protection coming from it, or both. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Both, usually. Yes.
So feel free to like summarize that. It's better in your words.
I think intentionality is key. And again, like, I would reiterate that, like, I don't think it's this massive shift. I don't think it's a massive shift for people. My number one thing right now, it's that Chris Stapleton song, right? Like, what are you listening to? And so he says it much more soulful and sings it much better. I'm going to listen to it actually when I get in the car, which is totally contrary to everything I'm about to say. But I think it's just that, like, when I think about people and following Jesus right now, it's how many things are fighting for your attention And it's, at every turn, when you're in the car, when you're getting ready, when you're at work, when you're walking the dog, all of those things that you're listening to that are feeding you are things that are making you a disciple. They are what you are an apprentice under. And so like if there's an important thing that I think is super practical, it's like switch up what you're an audience of. Like I honestly think it's that simple. Like I don't think it's complex. I think followers of Jesus, the whole like I'm not good enough, or I'm following Jesus now, or I connected to the life-changing power of Jesus Christ, but I still wrestle with sin. I still wrestle with pornography. I still wrestle with lust. My question is always like, well, what are you feeding? What's eating? Like, is your flesh eating? Because it's still there. Like, you're dead to your sin and alive to God through Christ Jesus, but like your flesh ain't fully dead yet. So like, are you allowing your flesh to eat, or are you feeding the Spirit of God that lives inside of you? Well, if you're a follower of Jesus, then the intentionality bit is to constantly be feeding the Spirit of God that lives inside of you. And so if you're watching stuff like right now, for me, like I like the show Suits. I really want to finish it. I'm on season 6. I'm almost there. Netflix is supposed to be coming out with a new season. I really want to finish it. But every time I'm done sitting on the couch watching 5 episodes with Janae, we got a new baby, bro. Yeah, I watched 5 episodes. Like after I'm done doing that, I look up and I'm like, was that good for my soul? And if it's gray area, if it's a gray area, then it's a no. If it's a maybe, there was a lot of cussing in there, bro. Maybe it's a no. And I think that we spend most of our drive time, most of our time getting ready, most of our free time feeding our flesh. I don't think it's a gray. I think it's you feed the flesh or you feed the Spirit of God that lives inside of you. And so like when temptation and your flesh is ready to be your flesh, your spirit is having a tough time fighting because you ain't fed it. And so like as followers of Jesus, the encouragement would be like, man, feed the Spirit of God that lives inside of you. When you drive home, like, put on soul food horns and pray, or put on worship music or put on the Bible.
What's the stakes if you don't? So if you choose to not sacrifice time, if you choose to feed the flesh, you're a Christian. We've talked about, salvation.
Yeah.
We believe that, like, hey, I got into heaven.
Yeah. Your salvation's secure, but you're not going to look like Jesus here. Like the stakes is your neighbor. The stakes are high for the people around you that you were purposed to connect to the life-changing power of Jesus. And I believe God is going to save who he wants to save. Like God can do and will do whatever it is that he wants to do, like wholeheartedly, like God can and will. But like, what an opportunity for you to look at your school or your job or your neighborhood as a mission field. And when you spend your time feeding your flesh, it's a selfish opportunity to say, man, I'm not looking for any of those opportunities because I want to feed me. Instead of, I want to feed the Spirit of God inside of me so that I can look outside of myself. And so like, I think the stakes are salvations. I think the stakes are evangelism. I think the stakes are like, man, are we walking in humility? Are we walking with the fruit of the Spirit, or are we walking in pride? I think the stakes say like, man, you can have salvation and yet not look like Jesus at all.
Yeah. So looking like Jesus translates, I think, to the richest life we can possibly experience.
Having life and life abundantly.
Yeah, I think John describes like heaven on earth, like heaven being like the fullness of God. Yeah. We can have super great glimpses of that.
Yeah.
the more that we say no to the flesh, the more that we chase after the Spirit.
Right.
And so many people are missing out on experiencing that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And if we stopped and we looked at all the things we were doing, we were trying to be good, we were trying to appease this person, we were trying to check this box, or, you know, this thing that we were influenced by, this mom vlog thing, whatever it is that's causing us to feel like we have to do all of these things.
Right.
We're doing, nobody's doing that saying, I hope that my life is more meaningless.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right?
Nope. Nobody.
Yeah.
Just had to think about it. But nope, nobody.
And so what you're talking about is like, this is really like a game-changing play and strategy.
Yeah.
Is this intentionality? It's not necessarily more efficient.
Right.
It's not necessarily meaning like our church is going to all of a sudden just explode with numbers if we do this.
Right.
Like this isn't like necessarily a marketing strategy.
No.
This is not necessarily even like a growth hacking that you're like, I got this vision that is just going to do X, Y, or is it have any other outcomes other than this is the way that people can experience life most abundantly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we all really want.
Yeah.
So is there a summary, I think, here, as I'm kind of breaking from my notes and thoughts? I want to put a closing kind of thought to the discipleship conversation.
Yeah.
The stakes are important. Could you take it one step further on the stakes? Because I mean, I really want you to get down to like consider like what your minutes mean to your life.
Yeah.
What they're worth.
Right.
Consider your relationships with your kids.
Yeah.
Consider the relationships with your parents or your spouse. We've been talking a lot about neighbors, but the reality is like
Your family.
we care about our families a lot. And what is pursuing and sacrificing to be still mean, to the things that are most meaningful to us?
I think being still, being intentional about genuinely being a follower of Jesus, the stakes are so great and it is so important, specifically for your family, because I'll tell you, like I just recently told the church, resources are helpful, relationships, strategic partnerships, generational wealth is helpful. But at the end of the day, if your family has been left spiritually bankrupt without a spiritual head that is a dad and a mom that has taught you how to follow Jesus, what's the point? Like what legacy are you going to leave them? Are you going to leave them money so that they don't know how to give back to the Lord? So that they squander everything that you've given them? Like you can give them the world, and without Jesus, like they'll squander, like they can't take that with them. And so the question then becomes like, man, what kind of legacy do we want to leave our kids? It was laughable to me, like when people would bring students to youth group and be like, hey, we need you to save our kids. And I'm like, I can't save your children. Like the greatest discipleship base is the home, is your home. Like you looking like Jesus in your home. I'm going to be home at 4:30, like no matter what right now. In this season, my kids are going to know like dad's here, dad's present. Like I want them to grow up loving the church. I don't want them to grow up resenting the church because dad's always gone. Dad's always at work. The church is what takes dad away. No, like I want them to love the church because they're like, yo, the church is like how dad serves God. Like, but dad serving God means he loves us really well. That's it. It's the most important thing. They're the most important ones. And at the end of the day, like if you're trying to grow a business or if you're trying to grow wealth and not your family, like your family is your very first ministry. They're the most important ones. And so like this being still and knowing, like this discipleship thing, us being followers of Jesus, like that puts that at the forefront. It puts like, man, your relationship with Jesus, you know, your relationship with your spouse, and then like your kids and your family. And it's like, that's the most important thing. God has blessed you with a job. God has blessed you with relationships. God has blessed you with means, but those all come from God. So like, how about we worship the one that it came from instead of worshiping the gift itself? I think it's that simple. It's hard to do. It is, especially for driven people. I'm a driven person. I would consider myself even to be a workaholic. I love work. I like box checking. I really do. And so I have to be very intentional when I go home. When I go home at 4:30, I have to throw my phone in another room. Because if not, like I'm gonna be checking email, I'm gonna be, you know, taking calls, I'm gonna be doing all kinds of stuff. Like you can't get me. Why? Because if you get me, everybody else can too. Because I'm gonna lock in. I'm gonna go into my office. I'm gonna lock in. My daughter's gonna be banging on the door and she's gonna be crying because she can't get into dad's office. My wife's gonna be losing her mind because my daughter's gonna be screaming, and so is my son. I should be a father. So I think that's essential.
Cool. It's a lot at stake.
Yeah.
So thanks for taking the time to kind of unpack the vision you've got for discipleship.
Yeah.
Prayerfully seeking, you know, what it is that God wants for TC3.
Yeah.
Thank you for leading the way that you're leading. And I'm excited for the next one.
Thanks. Me too.